You're listening to the Get Out of Your Own Damn Way podcast, episode number 109.
See Jane. See Jane change. Jane changes because she wants to, not because she has to. Jane is cool. Let me teach you how Jane shifted her perceptions to master the new paradigm of change. Come on, you know you want to. Be more like Jane. Welcome to the Get Out of Your Own Damn Way podcast. I'm your host, Krylyn Peters. Each week, I bring you inspiring messages to help you create the life you're meant to lead. Buckle up, buttercups. Hi, and welcome to the podcast. I am Krylyn, and I am excited to continue this series on change that I have been providing to you over the last few weeks, and we still have quite a few episodes to go. So I want to point you in the direction. If you didn't get to listen to the last 2 weeks worth, you're going to want to go back and listen. So a couple weeks ago, I talked all about the 12 different areas of your life that you can change. And then last week, I went through a formula that I developed to help you pinpoint which one area of your life to focus on changing first. And those are two of the most pivotal episodes in this series. So I definitely encourage you to go back and listen to those if you haven't. That's episodes number 107 and 108. And today in episode 109, I am going to bust through and talk about the old paradigm of change and I'm also going to talk about the new paradigm of change. So let's dive in. And actually, I'm going to point you also to go download the handout for today's episode at krylyn.com/109. That is going to go through a ton of the stuff that I'm going through today so that you don't have to try and remember it or write it down. And I'm actually going to give you a whole bunch of bonus material that I'll talk about in a little bit. So first, I want to talk about the old paradigm of change. And I'm sure you've heard of this, especially if you do any type of marketing in your life or if you have been exposed to marketing. And that, if you've either done it or been exposed to it, that pretty much encompasses everyone who is going to be listening to and or watching this episode right now. So I want you to think about the things that drive change in the marketing world. And there's two places that drive change. One is avoiding pain, and the other is seeking pleasure. So that's the old paradigm of change, where we're trying to avoid something that's really, really painful. We've gotten to a point of it's just so unbearable that we have to change or we're just not going to be able to take it anymore. And let me just say that is still a very valid reason to change. However, I have found a lot in talking to people, including my clients, my colleagues, my friends, my family, over the last several years, that paradigm doesn't necessarily apply as much anymore. Because here's the thing. I don't know about you, but I don't want to be in excruciating pain in order to change my life. That it's almost like the most masochistic thing that you could do in the entire universe is to wait until you are in so much physical and or emotional pain to make a change. And what I'm finding is that a lot of people don't want to wait that long. Or when you get to that point, you're also not in the best frame of mind to be making major life decisions either, because you're in such a heightened state of pain. And that is not necessarily the best time to be making changes and decisions that are going to greatly impact you. It can also be a time of desperation. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to be in a place of desperation when I'm making a major life decision. And like I said, not to say that those are not valid times to do that. However, I think that the new paradigm, which I'm going to get to in a minute, is a much more palatable and easy flowing way to approach change. The other part of that old paradigm of change is seeking pleasure. And again, that is another very valid place to come at change from. However, I'm going to talk about what I think is wrong with that. And that is that when we're just focused on seeking pleasure, we are not able to identify where we're at. We may kind of gloss over the other stuff that's going on in our lives in the pursuit of being in a much better place and looking at things that may be very challenging to obtain without some groundwork. And you know me, I'm the person who I like to confront what's going on. I don't like to sweep things under the rug. I like to just look at it, face our fears head on, and go for it. And the idea of seeking pleasure, I think, is a good one for sure. Again, another valid place to come at change from. However, it doesn't quite fit this shift that I've been seeing over the last several years with my clients, with my colleagues, and with pretty much everyone I come in contact with. So now let me talk about the new paradigm of change. And this is really coming from a place where things are going pretty well. You're basically happy or content with several areas of your life. However, you're just not as fulfilled or satisfied as you think you should be based on what you had wanted to create when you started on the path towards that particular goal. This new paradigm of change really is more focused on satisfaction. So, how satisfied, how fulfilled are you in your current set of circumstances? And it's really has more to do with your satisfaction than the level of success you've achieved. Because as we all know, we all define success differently. So you start off at point A, you've got a goal to get to point B, you get there and you're like, this isn't quite what I thought it was going to be. So to give you a personal example, I had this in my career a few years ago, having gone through a master's program in counseling and gone out and become a licensed psychotherapist and worked with clients at a mental health clinic. And I felt like I was doing some good work, but it wasn't fulfilling me in the way that I had anticipated it fulfilling me. And it's one of those jobs where people get to midlife, they start evaluating and they're like, oh my goodness, I want a job that is going to fulfill me, something where I feel like I'm going to give back. And so I already kind of had one of those jobs that a lot of people think, oh, that must be the most fulfilling work in the world. And for me, there was a disconnect. So yes, I was doing good work and enjoying most of what I was doing. However, it wasn't quite what I thought it was going to be. So it can be like that for you in your career. It can be like that in your relationships, in your health, or in any of those other 12 areas that I discussed a couple weeks ago in episode number 107. So that's really the rub, is that it's all about satisfaction. And in preparing for this episode, I was starting to look online thinking, what are some good questions we can ask ourselves about satisfaction? And again, I'm going to include all of these in the handout that you can download for this week's episode at krylyn.com/109. But I'm just going to go through, I think there's 5 of them, questions that you can ask yourself about your overall satisfaction. So the first one is, in most ways, my life is close to my ideal. So you got to kind of figure out where you are. And in this example, in what I found online, and I have a link to it in the handout, it's actually a rating scale. I believe it was 1 to 10. So rating your overall, like in most ways, my life is close to my ideal. On what part of the scale would you be? The next statement is, the conditions of my life are excellent. So taking a look at the conditions and however you define conditions. So that's the second one. The third one is simply, I am satisfied with my life. And then you rate that as well. The next one, number 4, so far, I have gotten the important things I want in life. And this is a really good evaluative statement for you to figure out, like, where did I want to be? Looking back when I was such and such an age and I had these goals to be somewhere in my life at this point that I'm at currently, and have you met those goals? It's so really a nice way to take a look back. And then number 5 is, if I could live my life over, I would change almost nothing. And again, giving that a rating on a scale of 1 to 10. I'm going to include all of those in the handout so that you can take a closer look at those. And then also it links to the actual assessment online, which gives you kind of a range and tells you where you might be on that satisfaction scale. So a really cool evaluative type of assessment that you can do to kind of rate where you are. And you might already have a really good idea of where you're at. Because if you're like me, and if you're like a lot of people that I've talked to in recent years, there is more of that that feeling, which is part of that new paradigm of, I'm just not feeling quite satisfied. So it's not a place of being in that pain or necessarily seeking pleasure. It's more of a, I thought it would be different, and I want it to be different, so therefore I'm going to change. And one of the things that I really want to drive home in this episode that kind of compares the old paradigm with the new paradigm is this idea of pain, because it's so prevalent, and I still see a lot of messages out there that really hone in on this idea of being in pain. And when I was a new therapist, this is something that, we had to deal with a lot of times, because people would come to us when they were at such a critical pain point in their lives. So what I want to say is this: you do not have to be in excruciating pain in order to change. You just have to be in a place of wanting things to be different. And that's really the biggest takeaway for the new paradigm of change that I can offer you today. Thanks for joining me for today's episode. Stay tuned, as next week I'm going to talk all about the dissatisfaction that might come as you are moving along in your change journey. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to the Get Out of Your Own Damn Way podcast. If you've been inspired, please share the podcast with your friends. You can find us on iTunes or at Krylyn.com. KRYLYN.com.